Let me be direct with you right now because what is unfolding across northern Israel demands absolute clarity, not the careful language of diplomatic briefings or the sanitized sound bites of evening news segments. What we are watching is not a temporary security precaution. It is not a routine civil defense drill designed to reassure a nervous population, and it is certainly not an overreaction to isolated rocket fire. What we are witnessing instead is the quiet, reluctant, and deeply significant admission by the Israeli Defense Forces that Haifa, Israel's third-largest city, the beating heart of its northern industrial corridor and home to nearly 300,000 people, has effectively become indefensible against the missile systems now deployed along its borders.
Pause money for you. Dorta. I have been looking at evacuation orders that have been circulating among Israeli civil defense officials for the past 96 hours, and I need you to understand what these documents actually represent. They are not recommending that residents of Haifa consider temporary relocation as a precautionary measure. They are not suggesting that elderly or vulnerable populations seek shelter in designated safe rooms. What these orders state explicitly in cold bureaucratic language is that 50,000 human beings, 50,000 individual lives, families, workers, children are being systematically moved out of the northern districts of Haifa because the Israeli military command has reached a conclusion that no nation ever wants to reach about its own territory. They have concluded that the missile threat is too severe, too accurate, and too overwhelming to manage through interception alone. Over the next 20 minutes, I am going to walk you through exactly why this evacuation represents a fundamental shift in the strategic calculus of this entire conflict, why the missile systems that forced this decision are unlike anything Israel has faced in previous wars against Hezbollah or Hamas, and why what happens in Haifa over the next 30 days will determine whether this war expands into a regional catastrophe or contracts back into the shadows of low-intensity conflict. This is the kind of analysis you are not getting from mainstream coverage, the kind that connects technical military assessments to real human consequences. If you have not already subscribed to this channel, do it now, because what we are about to cover is being actively assessed by defense analysts across 3 continents, and the implications extend far beyond the borders of Israel and Lebanon. Let us start with Haifa itself, because geography dictates strategy in ways that no amount of military technology, no air defense system, no precision-guided munition can ever fully overcome. Haifa sits on the Mediterranean coast, approximately 35 kilometers south of the Lebanese border. Let me put that distance into perspective for you. 35 kilometers is roughly 22 miles. That is a 12-minute flight time for a subsonic cruise missile, the kind that can hug terrain and evade radar. It is a 4-minute flight time for a ballistic missile in its terminal phase, when it is already screaming down toward its target at multiple times the speed of sound. And it is a 90-second flight time for a hypersonic glide vehicle, though we have no confirmed evidence that such systems are currently deployed in southern Lebanon. The fact that we even have to discuss that possibility tells you everything about how the technological landscape of this conflict has changed. The city itself is built on the northern slope of Mount Carmel, which rises approximately 546 meters above sea level. That terrain creates a natural amphitheater facing north and northeast, directly toward Lebanon, meaning that incoming missiles have a clear, unobstructed path to their targets. Haifa is home to Israel's largest port, handling approximately 26 million tons of cargo annually. Everything from food to military equipment to raw industrial materials. It hosts major petrochemical facilities, including refineries that process roughly 60% of Israel's domestic oil consumption, making it not just a population center, but a critical node in the nation's energy infrastructure. The Matam High-Tech Industrial Park, located in the southern suburbs, employs over 14,000 workers in defense, electronics, cybersecurity, and advanced manufacturing, the kind of specialized workforce that cannot be easily replaced or relocated on short notice. In short, Haifa is not just another Israeli city. It is a strategic node whose disruption would cascade through Israel's economy and military supply chain like a domino effect, impacting everything from fuel prices to weapons production to the daily lives of millions of Israelis who do not live anywhere near the northern border. According to reporting by the Times of Israel and confirmed by multiple Israeli defense correspondents with direct access to military sources, the evacuation orders initially targeted residents within 3 kilometers of the coast and the northern neighborhoods closest to the Lebanese border. But over the past 72 hours, those orders have expanded significantly. They now include portions of Kiryat Yam, Kiryat Bialik, and the industrial zones near the port itself. The Israeli Home Front Command has stated publicly that these evacuations are, and I am quoting the official statement directly here, a precautionary measure in response to credible intelligence regarding advanced missile threats that exceed current interception capabilities in the northern sector. That language is carefully chosen. Exceed current interception capabilities. That is military speak, for we cannot stop what is coming. Subscribe if you are watching this and realizing that you are not getting this level of analysis anywhere else on this platform. Now let us talk about what Hezbollah has actually deployed along the border, because this is where the mainstream narrative diverges sharply from the technical reality on the ground. Announcement number 1, the Fate 110 family of missiles. This one matters more than anything else happening in this theater right now, because it represents a qualitative leap in precision strike capability that fundamentally alters the cost-benefit analysis of Israeli air defense. The Fate 110 is a solid-fuel single-stage ballistic missile originally developed in Iran and subsequently transferred to Hezbollah in various configurations over the past 8 years. The baseline variant has a range of approximately 300 kilometers, more than enough to reach any target in Israel from launch sites in southern Lebanon. But the upgraded Fate 313 variant, which intelligence assessments suggest Hezbollah possesses in significant quantities, extends that range to 500 kilometers with a circular error probable of less than 10 meters. Let me explain what that means. 10 meters circular error probable means that if Hezbollah fires 100 of these missiles, half of them will land within 10 meters of the aim point. That is not area bombardment. That is precision strike capability. That means these missiles can reliably hit a specific building, not just a neighborhood, not just a military base, but a specific warehouse, a specific fuel tank, a specific command center. According to Defense News and confirmed by statements from former Israeli Air Force General Eitan Ben Eliyahu, Hezbollah is estimated to possess between 400 and 700 Fate series missiles. That number matters. Compare that to the approximately 2,500 rockets Hezbollah fired during the entire 2006 war, and you begin to understand the scale of the arsenal now pointed at northern Israel. But the issue is not just quantity. It is accuracy combined with terminal velocity. The Fate 110 in its terminal phase reaches speeds of approximately Mach 3.5, which is roughly 4,200 kilometers per hour. Israeli Iron Dome batteries are optimized for intercepting slower-moving rockets and artillery shells, the kind of unguided projectiles that have characterized most previous conflicts. Interception success rates against those threats are above 85% in most scenarios, but against ballistic missiles traveling at MAC 3.5 with evasive maneuvering capabilities in the terminal phase, interception rates dropped significantly. Israeli defense officials have acknowledged in closed briefings, details of which were reported by Haaretz, that Iron Dome success rates against Fate-class missiles are estimated at between 50 and 65% under optimal conditions. And optimal conditions means perfect weather, no electronic countermeasures, multiple interceptors per target, and launch detection within seconds. Here is what that means in practical terms. If Hezbollah launches 10 FAT-110 missiles at a single target in Haifa, Israeli air defenses might intercept 6 or 7. 3 or 4 will likely reach their targets. If those targets are fuel depots, ammunition storage facilities, or critical infrastructure nodes, 3 successful strikes are sufficient to achieve the strategic objective. And here is the calculation that keeps Israeli defense planners awake at night. Each Iron Dome interceptor costs approximately $50,000. Each Fate 110 missile costs Hezbollah, according to estimates by the International Institute for Strategic Studies, somewhere between $200,000 and $300,000. On the surface, that looks like Israel has the advantage, a cheaper interceptor versus a more expensive missile. But that calculation only works in small-scale engagements, When Hezbollah fires salvos of 50 or 100 missiles at once, Israel has to fire multiple interceptors per incoming missile to maintain acceptable probability of kill. The cost-exchange ratio flips. It becomes economically and logistically unsustainable in a sustained missile campaign. That is announcement number 1. Announcement number 2, the hardened launch sites. This is the part that Israeli intelligence has confirmed, but that most Western media outlets have underreported or misunderstood entirely. Hezbollah did not simply stockpile missiles in hidden warehouses. Over the past decade, the organization has constructed an extensive network of hardened underground launch facilities throughout southern Lebanon, particularly in the areas north of the Litani River. According to satellite imagery analysis conducted by Imagat International and reported by Jaing's Defense Weekly, there are at minimum 120 confirmed underground launch sites and potentially as many as 200 additional suspected sites that Israeli intelligence has not yet been able to verify or destroy. These are not crude bunkers dug into hillsides. They are reinforced concrete structures buried under 15 to 20 meters of earth and rock, designed to withstand direct hits from precision-guided munitions, including the bunker buster bombs that Israel has used in previous campaigns. The missiles are stored horizontally in climate-controlled chambers protected from heat and humidity that could degrade their guidance systems. They are transported to launch rails via underground corridors and can be erected and fired within minutes of receiving the order. After launch, the crews retreat back underground, and the launch site itself becomes extremely difficult to target retroactively because there is no lingering heat signature, no exposed infrastructure, no telltale signs of activity that a drone or satellite can easily identify. This is guerrilla warfare adapted to ballistic missile technology, and it inverts the traditional cost-benefit calculation of air power. Israel can conduct airstrikes against these facilities, and it has conducted hundreds of strikes over the past 3 weeks. But each strike requires extensive intelligence preparation, multiple sorties, and precision munitions that cost between $500,000 and $2 million per unit, depending on the weapon system used. Even when a strike succeeds, it typically destroys one launch site, maybe 2 if they are clustered closely together. Hezbollah has over 100. Stay with me because this is where the narrative completely changes, and where the evacuation of Haifa becomes impossible to ignore as anything other than an admission of strategic vulnerability. Announcement number 3, and this one, almost nobody in the mainstream media is connecting correctly: the collapse of deterrence. For the past 17 years since the end of the 2006 Lebanon War, Israeli military doctrine in the north has rested on a single assumption that Hezbollah's missile arsenal, while large and increasingly capable, could be deterred from use through the threat of overwhelming retaliation. The logic was straightforward. If Hezbollah launches a significant missile barrage against Israeli cities, Israel will respond by devastating Lebanese infrastructure, destroying bridges, power plants, ports, and Hezbollah's political base in the southern suburbs of Beirut. The potential cost to Lebanon as a nation would be so catastrophic that Hezbollah's leadership would self-deter, except in scenarios where they felt their existence was directly threatened. That assumption has now collapsed. And it collapsed not because Hezbollah stopped caring about Lebanon, but because the strategic environment shifted in ways that changed the calculation on both sides. First, Hezbollah's political and military leadership has concluded correctly or incorrectly that Israel is already committed to a campaign of maximum pressure regardless of Hezbollah's restraint. The targeted assassinations of senior Hezbollah commanders, the ongoing Israeli operations in southern Lebanon, and the explicit statements by Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant that Israel seeks to push Hezbollah back beyond the Litani River have convinced Hezbollah's command that restraint will not prevent escalation. It will only delay it while Israel degrades Hezbollah's capabilities. Piecemeal, picking off commanders, destroying launch sites, and eroding the organization's military infrastructure over time. Second, the political cost of devastating Lebanon has increased for Israel in ways that complicate the retaliation calculus. According to reporting by Reuters and confirmed by statements from European diplomatic sources, France, Germany, and Italy have all conveyed to the Israeli government that large-scale destruction of Lebanese civilian infrastructure would result in suspension of military cooperation agreements and potential arms export restrictions. This is not an empty threat. After Israel's 2006 campaign in Lebanon, European public opinion turned sharply against Israeli military actions, and European governments faced domestic pressure that constrained their diplomatic support for Israel in international forums. The memory of that backlash is still fresh in European capitals, and they have made it clear that they will not support a repeat performance. Third, and this is the factor that most analysts are missing, Hezbollah has explicitly communicated that its targeting priorities have shifted. In previous conflicts, Hezbollah primarily targeted Israeli border towns and military installations. The strategic objective was to impose costs on Israeli military operations while minimizing the risk of all-out war. But statements released by Hezbollah's media office over the past 2 weeks have made it clear that in a sustained conflict, Hezbollah will target Israeli economic and industrial infrastructure directly. That means ports, that means refineries, that means power generation facilities, that means precisely the kinds of targets concentrated in Haifa. The reason the Israeli government ordered the evacuation of 50,000 residents from northern Haifa is the same reason they have quietly begun relocating key government functions out of northern district administrative centers. They have concluded that Hezbollah is willing to fire its precision missiles, that Israeli air defenses cannot reliably stop all of them, and that the political and economic cost of absorbing even a dozen successful strikes on critical infrastructure is unacceptably high. That is announcement number 3. Now let us talk about what is really happening behind the headlines, because there are 2 stories playing out simultaneously, and the mainstream media is only covering one of them. The dominant narrative is about Israeli military operations in southern Lebanon, Hezbollah rocket fire, and the ongoing diplomatic efforts to broker a ceasefire. That is the surface story, the one that fits neatly into daily news cycles and 30-second television segments. The deeper story is about the quiet recalculation happening inside the Israeli security establishment regarding the viability of Israel's northern border in its current configuration. Senior Israeli defense officials speaking on background to Israeli journalists have acknowledged that the IDF cannot simultaneously maintain offensive operations in Gaza, sustain a high-tempo air campaign in Lebanon, and defend northern Israel against a prolonged missile campaign that targets economic infrastructure rather than just population centers. The Israeli military is overstretched, and Hezbollah knows it. Think carefully about what this represents. When a government evacuates 50,000 citizens from a major city, not because of active combat in the streets, not because of an imminent ground invasion, but because of the threat of missile strikes from across the border, that government is admitting that it cannot protect those citizens through defensive means alone. It is an admission that the balance of risk has shifted, and that admission has cascading implications. If Haifa is vulnerable, then so is Acre, so is Nahariya, so is Tiberias. So are the towns and cities across the entire Galilee region. The same missile systems that threaten Haifa can reach every major population center in northern Israel, and the same limitations in air defense capability apply equally across the theater. Israeli military planners understand this, which is why the evacuation orders in Haifa are likely the first of many such orders if this conflict extends beyond the next several weeks. The Israeli government's public response has been to emphasize its offensive capabilities. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has stated that Israel will exact a heavy price from Hezbollah for every attack on Israeli civilians. Defense Minister Gallant has warned that Hezbollah's infrastructure in Lebanon will be destroyed. These are the statements you see in headlines. What you do not see reported as prominently are the internal IDF assessments leaked to Israeli media, which estimate that a full-scale war with Hezbollah would result in between 2,000 and 5,000 Israeli casualties in the first month alone, with economic costs exceeding $30 billion due to displacement, infrastructure damage, and the paralysis of northern Israel's economy. If you live in northern Israel, what is happening in Haifa is not a security story. It is a question of whether your home and your livelihood will still exist in 6 months. If you operate a business dependent on Haifa's port, this is not a regional conflict story. It is an existential threat to your supply chain. And if you are watching this from outside Israel and wondering why this matters to you, consider that Haifa handles a significant portion of Israel's fuel imports. Disruption to Haifa's port does not just affect Israel. It affects global shipping insurance rates, regional energy markets, and the risk calculations of every multinational corporation operating in the Eastern Mediterranean. This pattern has repeated throughout history, and every time it repeats, the outcome is the same. Let me take you back to the Peloponnesian War, which lasted from 431 to 404 BCE and pitted Athens and its maritime empire against Sparta and its land-based alliance. Athens was the dominant naval power of the Greek world. Its walls stretched from the city center to the port of Piraeus, ensuring that even under siege, Athens could be supplied by sea. Sparta, by contrast, excelled in land warfare, but lacked the naval capacity to challenge Athenian supremacy. The war was expected to favor Athens because of this asymmetry. What actually happened was a grinding decades-long stalemate that exhausted both sides. Athens could not defeat Sparta on land. Sparta could not break Athens by sea. Both powers poured resources into the conflict, neglecting internal development and alienating their respective allies. And while Athens and Sparta bled themselves across the Aegean, a third power, Persia, sat on the sidelines and watched. Persia had been the great enemy of all Greek city-states just decades earlier. But during the Peloponnesian War, Persia played Athens and Sparta against each other, providing financial support first to one side and then to the other, ensuring the war continued long enough to drain both powers beyond recovery. When the war finally ended with Athens' defeat, neither Athens nor Sparta emerged as the hegemon of the Greek world. Both were exhausted, depopulated, and financially ruined. Persia regained control over the Greek cities of Asia Minor without firing a single arrow. Now apply that framework to the current conflict. Israel is locked in simultaneous confrontations with Hamas in Gaza and Hezbollah in Lebanon, both of which are supported by Iran. The United States provides military aid to Israel, but has made it clear through multiple statements by Secretary of State Anthony Blinken and Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin that America will not commit ground forces to this conflict. Regional Arab states are maintaining carefully neutral positions, unwilling to support either side openly. And while Israel and its adversaries engage in this grinding, costly, and strategically inconclusive struggle, other powers are repositioning themselves to take advantage of the resulting vacuum. Iran is Israel's Persia in this analogy, funding and equipping proxy forces that impose costs on Israel without risking direct confrontation. Israel is Athens, possessing superior technology and external support, but overstretched across multiple theaters. Hezbollah is Sparta, lacking Israel's technological sophistication, but entrenched in terrain that negates many of Israel's conventional advantages. The parallel is not exact, but the dynamic is the same. Two powers exhaust themselves, and the third benefits. So, where does this leave us? Let me give you three clear paths forward, because there is no honest middle ground here. Path 1. Negotiated de-escalation. Israel and Hezbollah, through intermediaries, agree to a ceasefire that freezes current positions, establishes a buffer zone enforced by international observers, and postpones resolution of underlying disputes. This path requires both sides to accept outcomes they consider suboptimal. Israel would have to accept that Hezbollah remains armed and capable just across the border.